Hospitals are built around the idea that nothing important gets missed. That's probably why this one still stays with me. At 39, I was working nights as a medical equipment technician in Tucson, mostly handling 4 pumps, monitors, and ventilators, and the job was usually less dramatic than people imagine. You follow the checklist. You swap batteries. You run diagnostics. You clear error logs. If something acts strange, there's almost always a reason. That night I was covering an overnight inspection in an older regional hospital off North Campbell Avenue. Most departments in that wing were closed, which was the whole point. It's easier to test equipment when nobody needs it. I parked a little after 10:18 p.m., logged into the system, and wrote down Unit 3B, code 4172, on my worksheet. Warm night outside. Dust moving against the parking structure vents in that dry way Tucson gets. Inside, everything smelled faintly like floor cleaner and plastic. My routine was the same as always. Check power supply first. Battery health after that. Then network connection, alarm test, display test, any service tags that needed updating. The kind of work where you end up trusting repetition more than memory. One dumb thing I remember for no reason. My left sock had folded under my heel in my shoe, and I kept meaning to fix it. I never did. The first thing happened at 11:06 p.m. I know that because I wrote it down right away. I was in an empty recovery room testing a portable heart monitor that had come back from cleaning. Nobody in the room. No leads connected. The monitor was on idle, just finishing startup, when a pulse reading flashed onto the screen. 72 BPM. At first I thought it was just startup interference. That does happen. You get a dirty contact or some electrical noise when a unit powers on. I stood there waiting for it to clear. It didn't clear right away. That was the part that didn't sit right. The number held steady for maybe 20 seconds. Could have been a little less. Could have been more. I didn't time it because there was no reason to not then. It just sat there like the machine was reading someone calm and resting. Then it vanished. I checked the leads. Nothing attached. I restarted the unit. Normal. Ran the self-test. Passed. So I wrote transient startup artifact on the log sheet and moved on, because that was the most reasonable explanation, and because you can lose half a night in a hospital if you decide every strange reading means something. The air ducts were humming over the hallway ceiling. Somewhere farther down, a cart will squeaked once, then stopped. Otherwise quiet. At 11:42 p.m., in the same wing, and 4 pumps started cycling. That sound is hard to mistake if you work around them enough. A soft mechanical click, then the internal motor stepping forward as if it's delivering medication. I was about halfway through checking a monitor mount outside a nurse station when I heard it. The pump was plugged in on a wall rack. No tubing attached. No bag hanging. Nothing connected to a patient because there was no patient there. I walked over and looked at the display. It was running a dosage sequence. Again, there are explanations for this. Pumps sometimes retain previous programming if somebody clears them improperly or puts them back into circulation before a full reset. Annoying, but not unusual. I went into the menu expecting to find an old profile still cached in memory. The schedule on the screen wasn't one I recognized. Not just unfamiliar. Wrong format. The values were arranged in a way our hospital database didn't use. I remember staring at it and thinking maybe pharmacy had updated something without telling Biomed, and then I started thinking about whether I'd locked my car or not, because that lot wasn't great and my mind does that when I'm tired. It jumps tracks for a second. Then the pump clicked again. Still cycling. Still with nothing attached. My mouth had gone dry by then. Not fear exactly. More like the feeling you get when you realize the obvious explanation is starting to slip and you don't yet have a replacement. I shut the pump down manually and pulled the plug. Screen dead. No issue after that. I wrote a note to quarantine it for software review. Even then, I was still trying to keep everything inside normal categories. Bad memory. Corrupted profile. Somebody's mistake on day shift. The third thing happened at 12:17 a.m. That time I know because the machine printed it for me. I was in the hallway near the edge of the renovated section, where part of the old ward had been cut back years earlier. Fewer rooms there now. Wider corridor. Newer paint that never quite matched the older walls. A vital signs monitor, mounted on a rolling stand, started registering data. Respiration first. Then pulse. No leads. No cuff. No sensor. Nothing connected to anything. I stopped moving. I could hear my own breathing more clearly than the machine for a second. Then the thermal printer kicked on with that dry scratching sound those little printers make, and a strip of paper started feeding out. Normal readings. That's what got me. Not wild values. Not alarms. Just regular, steady data. Like someone lying still in bed. Resting. Waiting to be checked. I took the strip and looked at the patient ID. Retired 3 years earlier. I knew that because part of my job involved cross-checking legacy equipment assignments during service updates. Some older IDs stayed in local memory on networked machines. Not often, but enough that I recognized the range. This one shouldn't have been active anywhere in the building. Then I looked lower. There was a room number printed there. The room number didn't exist anymore. I remember standing very still and reading it again. Same number. Same clean lettering. A room from the section removed in renovation. Not renamed. Removed. Drywalled over and absorbed into the new layout years before. No dramatic thought after that. No big moment where I decided it had to be something impossible. Just a smaller thought. If the monitor was receiving input, then from where? I powered down the station first. Then I disconnected the network port from the wall panel by hand. The monitor screen went dark. The hallway stayed quiet except for the vents and a distant elevator bell somewhere on another floor. Then the printer fed out one last strip. After the power was off. After the network cable was out. I folded that strip and put it in my pocket. Finished only the minimum notes I had to finish. Reported the equipment for review. I did not tell the overnight supervisor exactly what I thought, because I didn't know what I thought. I used words like residual data and network anomaly and legacy mapping conflict. Work words. Safe words. Since then, I've avoided overnight calls in recently renovated wings whenever I can. I trade shifts. I make excuses. Nobody has pushed me on it, because hospitals are full of people protecting their own little superstitions with practical language. The part one still come back to is the timestamp on that last strip. It was 2 minutes ahead. Not the printer clock. Not system drift. 2 minutes ahead of the time on my phone when I checked it standing there in the hallway. I checked both twice. Maybe 3 times. I don't remember exactly. Hospitals record everything. Heartbeats, breaths, medication movement. Sometimes I wonder if the systems remember people longer than we do. If that quiet, clinical kind of wrongness got under your skin, go ahead, smash that like button. Subscribe so you never miss the next nightmare. Tell me which story messed with you the most. And if you think old hospital wings are empty just because the beds are gone, click now to watch 3 disturbing Airbnb horror stories. Because sometimes a place keeps functioning long after it should have gone still. Thanks for watching. Stay alert. Stay safe. And I'll see you in the next nightmare. Paper records are supposed to do one simple thing. They hold still. That's the whole comfort of them, really. A person changes, a building changes, policies change, software changes every 6 months if your hospital is badly managed enough. But an old chart is just a chart. It says what it says. At 44, I was working as a medical records archivist in Cleveland, mostly handling the slow conversion of older paper files into digital storage, and the work suited me because I've always been the kind of person who notices small mismatches. Wrong date format, different ink, a signature that leans one way on page 3 and another way on page 4. Usually there's an explanation. Usually it's boring. That Saturday I was on a weekend overnight shift in the basement archive wing of an older city hospital off East 93rd Street. We were preparing several cabinets for storage transfer, which meant scanning decades-old patient charts before the physical boxes went off-site. It was easier to do after hours because nobody from compliance or administration was walking through asking for something real quick. That actually took 40 minutes. I got there at 9:52 p.m., signed into the terminal, unlocked shelf B14, and started loading the first batch onto a rolling cart. Light rain outside. You could hear it dripping into the metal window wells near the ceiling of the basement. That sound never stopped down there. Just a steady metallic drip every few seconds. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in a way I'd stopped noticing years earlier, until a room went quiet, and then it was all you could hear. One ordinary thing I remember very clearly for no reason. The break room microwave clock was blinking 12 o'clock. Power must have gone out earlier in the day. Nobody had reset it. The first problem started at 10:38 p.m. I was scanning a run of cardiology discharge summaries from the late 90s when the document scanner paused halfway through feeding a page. Not a full jam. More like it hesitated, then clicked, then stopped as if it had detected something moving in the tray. That can happen with warped paper. Older charts absorb moisture, corners curl, staples leave impressions even after removal. I opened the top, flattened the sheet, checked for tears, and ran it again. Pause. Click. Stop. I fed the page by hand the third time, and it finally went through. When the image loaded on the monitor, there was a faint second signature at the bottom of the page. Not a shadow, not bleed-through from the reverse side. A second signature. The original paper in my hand only had one. I checked that twice, maybe 3 times. I tilted it under the desk lamp and even rubbed my thumb lightly over the line, as if some second layer of ink might show under a different angle. Nothing. Just the one doctor's signature, clean and faded. On the screen there were 2. The second one was lighter, almost like the scanner had picked up pressure marks from another page that wasn't there. I told myself that was probably it. Feed roller artifact. Compression issue. Some weird duplication during image processing. Old paper does strange things in high-speed scanners. I rescanned the sheet, and the extra signature was gone. That should have been the end of it. I made a note anyway. That's how my brain works. Small inconsistency, write it down, keep moving. Nothing happened for a while after that. Just the scanner rollers pulling paper through, my keyboard tapping, the cart creaking whenever I shifted a new stack into place. I remember thinking around then that I should text my wife before it got too late. Then I got pulled into a box of unsigned intake forms and forgot. At 11:14 p.m., a patient file reappeared in the recently scanned folder. I knew it had already been processed because I had closed it out myself earlier in the shift. Scan complete, metadata verified, destination archive confirmed. Done. The file popped back into the recent queue while I was indexing another batch from neurology. That actually had a reasonable explanation too. Server sync delays happened from time to time, especially with legacy folders that had to pass through older naming conventions before landing in the correct digital archive. Basement network was not the best. Half our department had been complaining about it for months. So I reopened the file expecting to find some mismatch in file pathing or a duplicate upload. Instead, there was a discharge note in it that hadn't been there before. Dated after the patient's recorded death. Not years after. Not some dramatic gap like that. A matter of days, I think. Maybe 4. I don't remember the exact number now. What I remember is that I stared at the death entry first, then the discharge note, then back again, because those are 2 kinds of records that do not belong in that order. The note itself was ordinary. That was the part that bothered me more than if it had said something strange. Standard clinical language, tolerating fluids, ambulating with assistance, follow-up instructions, nothing theatrical, just routine continuation in a file that should have stopped. I checked the source scan log. No new upload from my station. No manual edit flag either. For a second I started thinking maybe another workstation upstairs had synced to my queue by mistake, and then I found myself wondering whether I'd left my car windows cracked in the rain because I had parked in the side lot and the weather had looked on and off all evening. Then the scanner started feeding pages. I hadn't put any in. The time was 11:53 p.m. The tray was empty. I know it was empty because I had just cleared the last stack and turned slightly to reach for the next sealed file box across the room. Then I heard the rollers engage, and the scanner began pulling paper through with that soft, steady sound it made when a batch was aligned correctly. I didn't move right away. I just listened. Then I walked back and looked down. Pages were going through, one after another. I counted them because counting felt useful, and because it kept me from thinking too far ahead. 4, 5, 6, 7. My breathing had slowed in that automatic way it does when part of you decides not to waste motion. The stack feeder was moving, but the only box those pages could have come from was still sealed on the cart across the room with its transfer tape uncut. That was when my back touched the edge of the cabinet behind me and stayed there. I don't know exactly how long I stood like that. When the feed stopped, I went to the monitor. The scanned pages belonged to a ward that had been demolished in a renovation about 20 years earlier. Not renamed, not reassigned, gone. I remember reading the ward code once. Then again, the patient updates were normal. Temperature, medication adjustment, diet note, an overnight observation. Nothing unusual in the content at all. That made it worse. A dramatic error would have helped. Corrupt text, gibberish, random characters, something obvious. Instead it looked like ongoing paperwork from a place that no longer existed, as if the record system had simply continued doing its job somewhere nobody could get to anymore. I unplugged the scanner first. Then I shut down the archive workstation. No cleanup pass. No attempt to verify against the central server. Just power down, lock cabinet, and shift. When the monitor went black, the folder count in the lower corner flickered for a second. One additional file. Then it disappeared. After that night, I stopped taking overnight archive shifts in the basement wing. I swapped weekends. Covered daytime storage prep instead. When people asked, I said the basement network was unreliable and the lighting gave me headaches, which was true enough that nobody pushed it. The extra file never showed up again, at least not where I could find it. But I did check the old hospital blueprint a week later, mostly to prove something to myself. The room number attached to that missing file had been removed from the plan decades earlier, during the renovation that erased the ward. Paper records are supposed to freeze a moment in time, but some of those files looked like they were still being written. If that quiet, administrative kind of wrongness got to you, go ahead, smash that like button. Subscribe so you never miss the next nightmare. Tell me which story messed with you the most. And if you think old hospital records are harmless just because the patients are gone, click now to watch 3 disturbing camping horror stories. Because some systems don't seem to understand when something is over. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare. Elevators make people think in simple terms. Up, down, open, close. Most people trust them because they've used them so many times they stop noticing the machine part of it. That was more or less my whole job at 37. I was an elevator maintenance contractor in Sacramento, mostly servicing lift systems in larger commercial buildings and hospitals, and I liked the work because mechanical problems usually had boundaries. A relay fails. A door track drifts out of alignment. A sensor gets dirty. You isolate the variable, confirm it, fix it, and move on. That night I was working a late maintenance window at a big public hospital near Broadway and Stockton Boulevard. Hospitals like doing elevator work after midnight because you can shut cars down floor by floor without fighting daytime traffic. Less interruption, less complaining. I arrived at 1:05 a.m., checked in with facilities, signed out the service keys, and headed for car 6. Service panel code 9083. Mild air outside. Every now and then an ambulance came in, tires hissing on the driveway, then everything settled again. My routine was the same as always. Inspect door operation first. Test recall. Check controller logs. Run the car in service mode. Listen for anything that didn't belong there. A lot of the work is listening, actually. Cables talk. Relays talk. Tracks talk. People think elevators fail all at once, but usually they tell you ahead of time. One ordinary thing I remember for no reason. I had bought a vending machine coffee from the lobby and forgotten it on top of a linen cart near the service corridor. I only remembered halfway through the first inspection, and by then it had probably gone cold. The first odd thing showed up at 1:32 a.m. Car 6 registered a call from the 4th floor. That floor was closed for cleaning. At least that's what the facilities guy had told me. Later somebody said part of it was actually under renovation and part of it was closed for cleaning, which sounds more realistic, but at the time all I knew was that nobody was supposed to be using it. The hall station lamp for 4 lit up on the panel. Then it cleared. Then, exactly 90 seconds later, it lit again. That kind of pattern usually means wiring. A stuck call button, moisture in a contact, bad board input. Something along those lines. Not unusual in older buildings. What I didn't like was the timing. It reset every 90 seconds. Not around 90. Not roughly. Exactly. I watched it cycle 3 times while standing there with my clipboard tucked under my arm and the controller cabinet open beside me. There are mechanical failures that repeat consistently, sure, but they usually have a little wobble to them. Slight variation. A signal delay. Something imperfect. This was clean. I noted it in the log and started tracing the input, expecting to find a sticky switch or damaged wire harness. Relay clicks inside the control cabinet. Soft hum from the machine room equipment. Doors opening and closing down the hall for other cars. All normal. Nothing obvious came up. At one point I caught myself thinking about the coffee again, whether somebody had thrown it away, or whether I'd still have to look at it later sitting there untouched. And then the 4th-floor call lit up again, and I went back to work. At 1:57 a.m., with the car in maintenance mode, the doors opened between floors. Not fully. just enough to show darkness and concrete. We were stopped between levels while I was checking door response through the service panel. Then the doors slid apart a few inches on their own and closed again. That can happen during calibration drift. The system misreads leveling position, thinks it's correcting, does something small and dumb. I'd seen stranger, so I pulled the log to see what the controller recorded. Weight load, 1 passenger. That was the entry. 1 passenger. I was alone. The car was empty except for my tool bag, and that wouldn't register like that. Not that precisely. There are ways a load sensor can throw bad data, but again, bad data usually looks sloppy. Too high, too low, fluctuating nonsense. This was neat. 1 rider. Clean entry. Time stamped like any ordinary trip. My mouth had gone dry by then. Not panic. More like the physical feeling of falling out of sync with the explanation you'd been using 5 minutes earlier. I checked the service override. Still engaged. I reran the door test. No problem. Pulled the load sensor reading again. Normal. That should have reassured me, and maybe it did for a minute. I remember tightening a loose fastener on the inner panel after that, just to do something with my hands that made sense. The third incident happened at 2:21 a.m. I was positioned inside the maintenance access area, not fully in the shaft exactly, but in that narrow service space where you can inspect components while the car is supposed to remain under your control. The override key had been removed from the control system. That's important. It wasn't sitting there half-turned. It wasn't loose in the switch. It was in my pocket. Then the cables above me tightened. Anyone who works around elevators long enough knows that sound. A subtle tension change first, then the low mechanical shift of a system taking a command. The car moved. Up. To the 4th floor. I stopped where I was and listened. No sudden reaction. No yelling. No heroic scramble. Just stillness. My body went that way before my thoughts did. I noticed I was holding my breath. Then I let it out slowly and listened to the cables settle overhead. There should not have been any movement. Not with the key out. Not with the maintenance lockout in place. That wasn't a software quirk anymore. The explanation I'd been using all night, faulty input, drift, 1 bad component affecting the system, stopped covering it. I climbed out, went to the hallway monitor feed tied to the car's internal camera, and brought up the 4th floor view. A hospital bed crossed the screen. Not fast, just steady. Pushed from left to right across the hallway outside the elevator. The lights on that floor were off. That's what I remember most clearly. Not dim. Off. The hallway was dark except for the low spill of emergency lighting and the grayscale wash from the camera itself. No staff around. No active transport team. No overhead page. Just that bed moving across the frame, and then out of view. I don't know exactly how long I stood there watching the monitor after it happened. A few seconds maybe. Maybe longer. Then I rewound it mentally the way people do when they're trying to find the normal part they missed. Maybe security had let someone up. Maybe environmental services was moving equipment in the dark for some reason. Maybe the floor wasn't as closed as I'd been told. My brain kept trying to return the event to hospital policy, scheduling, permissions. Human explanations. But the car had answered a call with the key out. That was the part one kept coming back to. I disabled car 6 completely after that and locked the control cabinet. Then I called the overnight facilities supervisor and told him the car had become unreliable during service mode. I kept my wording narrow. Mechanical language. Safe language. He called security to check the 4th floor while I stayed by the controller. They reported no movement. No people. No equipment out of place. The floor was quiet. After that night, I stopped taking maintenance shifts after midnight in hospitals if I could avoid them. Offices, hotels, apartment towers, fine. Medical buildings after midnight, no. I swapped jobs, passed referrals to other contractors, made excuses about scheduling conflicts. Most people in service work have 1 or 2 buildings they don't like for reasons they can't fully explain, so nobody pressed me much. A week later, I looked at the system logs again because part of me still wanted a technical answer. The 4th floor call pattern had continued for another hour after shutdown. Every 90 seconds. Logged cleanly, even with car 6 disabled. Elevators are simple systems. They move when someone presses a button. I still don't know who kept calling that floor. If that cold, mechanical kind of wrongness stayed with you, go ahead, smash that like button. Subscribe so you never miss the next nightmare. Tell me which story messed with you the most. And if you think a sealed floor stays empty just because access is restricted, Click now to watch 3 scary road trip horror stories. Because some parts of a building keep using their routines, whether people are there or not. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.